I don't know where I'm going to edit this in. I think I'm just going to put it at the beginning. But did you listen to last week's show?
I listened to about half of it, and then I got distracted and didn't finish it. It's like I was there. I know most of it.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. If I wasn't vain, I wouldn't listen to the whole thing. But I also caught quite a few of my own mistakes from last week. So, for one, on the influx of highly capable developers, I'm going to go ahead and take that back. People that are truly great developers are a rarity in the world, and I've discovered that over the last week. Two,
is this our follow-up?
The audio is going to be... Yeah, this is basically follow-up. The audio is going to be a lot better for this week. 3, something I'm surprised that we were both ignorant to, and you can comment on this if you want.
Okay.
But we were talking about like subscription-based services and stuff like that for games, and you mentioned EA Access.
Right.
I don't know how we missed this, but Xbox One, what is it? It's a Game Pass or something?
Right.
That's definitely a thing, and PS Plus.
Yeah, like, I knew that for some reason, like, EA Access, that's a thing the kids do. Weird.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that I didn't realize until after I was listening to myself. Like, apparently when we're recording these things, I just kind of tune out and say words. And then afterwards, I'm like, that is the exact opposite thing that I intended to convey.
I know, I cringe so much when I hear myself talk about any subject.
Right. But with all that stuff out of the way, we're hoping for a better show this week. Not that last week was terrible. I don't know. I'm going to cut all this out. But,
so we like officially
back.
started, or... Oh. Well, I just we just so good last week.
There's an intro. So, welcome back to Unplayed. Since last week, we've discussed some of the errors we made last week. We've also named the podcast Unplayed. That's something that we didn't mention at all. I'm realizing now I didn't include anything in the show notes that I said I would. That's something you might get used to.
Perfect.
Yeah. But we're back. Yeah, with some of that fresh gaming news.
And hopefully my voice sounds a lot better now.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about that. What was going on last week?
So, one, I was using a cheap mic, like for my headphones. It was like picking up that audio, and that was a terrible mistake. And I was also kind of sick with like allergies and everything, so it sounded... I still have a little bit like, going on right now, but I'm about 90% capacity, so I think it'll be a lot better.
Yeah, you sound a lot better to me for sure. Like even in the Skype, I mean, you didn't sound as bad to me in the Skype as you did. I mean, this is a little bit inside baseball, but like you sounded a lot worse on the audio track afterwards. But I can tell the difference even in the Skype audio.
So. I remember when you sent me the final cut, I was like, I really hope this isn't the final cut because I can't understand what I'm saying.
Okay. So... yeah, let's kick it off this week with... we've only got a little bit of news this week.
Because we're slackers.
So well, yeah, we're slackers. And, like, I don't know. I guess it's the same with all kinds of news websites, but, like, I searched through quite a bit of stuff to try to find things worth talking about this week, and apparently it was just slow. Right. So I guess we'll start with the Sea of Thieves launch trailer. So I don't know. The beta's been out for a while. Some people are really excited about it. Some people have seen this rodeo before, or so they think. So they're not excited at all. But I think you've been keeping up with it a little bit better than I have. So do you want to talk about Sea of Thieves, what it is, where it's been, and where it's going?
Well, sure. I don't really have that much information, but I have like seen it come across several times. Yeah, like you said, it's been in beta. It launches in a few days, I believe. I mean, it's pretty much a pirate game. Like, I think you can have like a crew of you and your friends. And you can go on different islands, explore, and try to find treasure. And there's, I think, other players you can battle. have like naval ship battles as well. I mean, it looks pretty good. I'm not a huge fan of the art style myself, but I know some people kind of like the
It's
differences.
definitely different. Yeah.
Right.
It's not quite blocky, but the lighting's kind of weird too. A lot of people talk about how beautiful the scenery is, and with that, I mean it's debatable, but definitely with the characters, I don't see it.
Right. And then, like, it seemed like it was going to be a pretty good indie game, but now it got so much press. Excuse me. My voice is still not there. What was I saying? Sorry, you're going to cut this.
Indie game got a lot of press.
All right. So it seemed to be like an indie game in development, but it got so much press that people just, I guess they decided they wanted to be more of a AAA type game. So now it seems like they've really made a final push in this final trailer with like the Kraken that shows up at the end. But I just don't know how this game's going to work. Like, it's supposed to be like one of the big game releases of the year from what I've seen, but I'm just not seeing it.
Yeah, I've watched a little bit of the gameplay, and like you said, I watched the launch trailer with the Kraken, and the Kraken seems like the first hint that there might be something interesting going on.
Right.
I think the game mostly relies on like camaraderie and your willingness to play with your friends, you know.
Like, I think that's going to be the main focus, is sort of like you and your friends exploring, sort of like Minecraft multiplayer. I think that's how it really took off. And I'm just worried it's going to be more of an empty type game. Like, the treasure and everything's going to be so sporadic. You're going to just be running around for hours without finding anything. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Right. And Rare, the developers of this game, said the exact same thing that you just did, trying to create an environment where there's not so much, I don't know, what would you call it? Like features where you can...
Right. It's more of a sandbox, I guess. Or like you get to go anywhere you want to go, and just there's not as much of a linear story as many other games have.
Right, and I mean there have been quite a few titles like this so far in gaming history, and and a lot of them have done really well, but this one has me worried in the same way that a lot of the ones that have failed had me worried. I keep seeing the same things over and over. There's a few skeletons to fight. Maybe you fight an NPC with your ship, and then you go to a mostly empty island, and there might be some treasure chests. And content is still, even with the huge multiplayer aspect, which is obviously an asset, like you can't cheap out on having stuff for those players to do. You can't count on them just traveling with each other and fighting each other forever. Like developers do have to make something. Right.
I think the novelty of just like exploring the ocean, like for a certain amount of time, that will probably get old. And I don't know. It just seems like when you have such an empty void of stuff, like when it's an ocean sea-based game like this, like players are going to get bored of it real quick. So I'm interested to see how they're going to adjust for that, or if they even will.
Yeah. And $60. It's coming out at normal game price for what, I mean, you took the words out of my mouth earlier. It started as an indie game.
Here we are. I mean, $60 seems pretty steep for this, but I guess it depends on how expansive it is. I'm not sure if it's going to be like randomly generated. I hope not, because that seems like a bad idea.
Doesn't this feel a lot like a game that was released, I don't know, a couple years ago, where there was a whole lot of hype about all the things that you could do with a crew of your friends and go to infinite places?
I imagine you're talking about No Man's Sky.
Something like that.
Yeah. So, yeah. How long has that game been out for 2 years or something now?
I don't know. It's so forgettable. That's the problem. It might have been 10 years. It's been so,
I mean, for those who don't know, it's pretty much a sci-fi game where the premise was like you get to go to these infinitely generating planets for the most part. It's like each planet's going to have different creatures and different plant life, and you get to explore all of it. But it was just all where it was randomly generated. It was just randomly generated garbage.
Yeah, I mean, it turned out to be mostly the same stuff, and that's what I fear for No Man's Sky is like, if the locations aren't different enough, if we're not progressing in some way, but there is the Kraken, and the Kraken might be exciting the first 2 or 3 times you see it, so.
Maybe he'll join your party and like right beside you in the battle.
Yeah, so actually where I saw some of this Sea of Thieves info was on, what is it called?
YouTube.
Come on, memory, don't fail me now. Xbox Inside Xbox?
Oh,
Xbox
yeah,
Insider?
maybe.
Yeah, it's back. The show that nobody's been asking for. This is just a little bit after Nintendo's 35-minute video, and last week you'll remember I gave Nintendo a little bit of flack by spending probably a little bit too much time on the tennis mechanics. I'd like to take this opportunity to officially apologize to Nintendo because I watched the first 30 minutes of the 2-hour Inside Xbox presentation, and they mostly talked about games that have been out for 2 years now. And they mentioned a little bit about Sea of Thieves, and they read some non sequitur tweets, and it was garbage. I don't know why they did that.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, I remember it seems like Microsoft's really hyping I believe it's their next E3 press conference. So maybe they're just saving everything till then. But I guess we'll do another Nintendo podcast when that comes up.
I have no problem with holding your content until E3. That's why E3 is so exciting.
Right. But
having your own in-house 2-hour-long announcement setup thing, and I don't know how often they're going to do these. They might have said later, but I'll be honest, I found it very hard to stick around.
Mm-hmm.
The presenters have a particular style that just doesn't agree with the way that I like to watch things.
Right.
That's not to say that it isn't for somebody, but definitely it wasn't for me, and there was no real news going on.
So do you think they're just trying to mimic Nintendo Direct with this kind of thing, since that was so popular?
Yeah, and the problem is they're not mimicking well enough. I mean, you could give a company like Microsoft flack for, imitating its competitors, but I think imitating Nintendo more closely would honestly be a benefit.
Right.
Xbox Inside was a live show, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Nintendo has carefully edited content to show us what we wanted to see, even if it's a little bit too much tennis. And I found that incredibly easy to watch. I mean, you even said that you don't like the handheld stuff, but I think you stuck through it.
Oh, definitely. Just because, I knew, even if it wasn't a game I was interested in, they would eventually cut to something else. So, it was always sort of exciting to see what the next game was going to be in the lineup. But with live shows, there's always just awkward pauses and everything, especially if the actors would ever mess up. It's just awkward for everybody involved.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. Nintendo definitely knocked it out of the park, and Microsoft released a presentation 4 times as long, and yet I got maybe a tenth of the information.
It's even if there was several titles that you was interested in, it's so sporadic throughout the 2 hours, you're gonna forget about them. But with Nintendo's, 7-8 minutes, actually I think it was 30 minutes, but still it was more condensed, and anything you wanted to have more information on, you were easily, let's see, you're more easily likely to remember it, I guess is a good way to put it.
Yeah, well, that's enough talking about that train wreck. I try not to think about the 24 precious minutes of my life that I wasted. So I think you've got a topic this week, so go ahead and explain the rules before I start talking about random games, probably Portal.
So I was just thinking that maybe we could talk about game writing and maybe just talk about some games that we found that was really good in video game narratives and ones that were really bad that we played.
Yeah. And what I like about narrative is that even if there's a bad story, often I find games with bad stories still playable. So right. You can really find these fantastic games that fail on the story part, and games that aren't traditionally good or fun to play that have excellent stories. So in no way are we commenting about the overall quality of these games. At least I'm not in my list.
Yeah, I was just making this up as I went. So do you want to start or shall I?
Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I would say one of my favorite narratives would be Fallout New Vegas. Just because that game had various endings and your choices sort of actually did matter in the end. Just when it was like end cards that show like different characters you interacted with and like what happened to them based on your actions throughout the game. And even just comparing that to other Fallout games, like your choices don't really matter as much. It was nice to see that kind of choice-based game actually affect the ending, which you don't see a whole lot in today's titles. I know you played Fallout New Vegas. How did you feel about it?
Fallout New Vegas is still my favorite Fallout title. A lot of the same things that you said. I like the environment. Definitely contributed to the storytelling. The dialogue options. You know, this was a time when most of the dialogue was still fully listed out on the screen, so we didn't just have buttons for sarcasm and stuff like that, which was in some ways limiting because it was really hard to parse sometimes how your character was going to say certain things.
Right. So you could say sarcastic to like just any character and just insult their whole family about it. So, but in like New Vegas and Fallout 3, it would actually give you like the full line of what your character was going to say. So there's never any terrible surprises.
Right. Well, or at least they were minimal. There were a few times when I said some things and was surprised at the tone, but yeah, I really enjoyed Fallout New Vegas. There were plenty of options. This was still pretty early on in, you know, it was, there were tons of options in that the game was essentially open world. So in what you did, you had tons of choice. Dialogue, I wouldn't say that we were quite as far as we are now, obviously. You know, Fallout New Vegas was, it was released back in 2010, which is actually the same year as Heavy Rain. And now Heavy Rain did stuff really well on the dialogue front.
Right. I was just going to say that game had a lot of plot holes in it. But as far as the actual narrative, like, as with New Vegas, the endings actually did matter. Like, if one of your characters died through your playthrough, like, they were going to stay dead. Like, there wasn't really a restart feature, even though I know a lot of players would just, like, reset their consoles. But the game encouraged you to just sort of go with whatever happens in a particular scene.
Yeah, and I mean that's something that was really great about Fallout New Vegas, and I mean this was a feature even from Fallout 3, with the relationships between you and the other characters. There were things that you could do that affected your reputation and how people saw you, and that could really change how easy or hard it was for you to be a certain character, or to you know, be that kind of, to be a certain kind of actor in the story you're trying to tell.
And something else was like in New Vegas, like you actually had faction levels, or like each faction you had a reputation with. So that would also play a factor. Like if you was really friendly with the NCR, which is sort of like the American government that's trying to rebuild themselves, if you were real friendly with them, naturally their enemies, the Legion, would hate you because of it. So like you couldn't really be friends with everybody, which was kind of a nice little thing, nice role-playing feature of it.
Yeah. And so New Vegas, I definitely put it on the positive narrative list. I think that overall that was one of the things that helped the game most. Of course, gameplay is a huge thing with Bethesda. They have a certain style, and if you like that style, you're probably going to like it. And if you don't like that style, you're probably not going to like the game very much. But I don't think that if you don't like New Vegas, it's probably not because of the story. I always felt really good about the storytelling in that game.
One thing we mentioned a lot was like the choices. How did you feel about the main story? We'll try to keep it spoiler free, but how did you feel about the pacing of it, so to speak?
Honestly, the pacing for New Vegas ramps up a little fast. I think New Vegas is like a lot of other Bethesda games in a way, which is that the main story isn't very long. Very long. My voice cracked there. So if you're not occupying yourself with side quests or personal vendettas, then the game ends up being kind of short. I'm not going to say that that's necessarily a flaw with the game. I mean, obviously it was probably longer than Fallout 3 if you didn't do side missions, because Fallout 3 had like a total of like 4 main missions.
If you knew where to go, like you could speed that game pretty quick.
So New Vegas was definitely an improvement on the form of those types of games, but the pacing itself could have been better. Dialogue, it was par for the course. This is, it's still pretty early in dialogue option history. And I think the environment did a lot for the storytelling, and the pacing probably could have been better.
Yeah, I feel kind of the same. Like at the beginning, you're just trying to find like the person that did something to you, and from there, like once you find the person, like the game is just like, oh, go solve the world's problems. Like it just kind of jumps pretty quick after that.
Yeah, Fallout's been criticized for the solve people's problems flaw, but it's it comes by it honestly. That's a flaw that it shares with tons of role-playing games. Even single-player story games like The Legend of Zelda, they kind of have that errand boy feel to it.
So even though the world's weight is upon your shoulder, you still got to go deliver a shoe to some old lady across the street. Like, the quests just don't really make sense.
Right. At a certain point, it doesn't make any sense for people to be asking you to do the things that they do.
Yeah, that's sort of my good story, good narrative that I feel. What about you?
Yeah, so the first one I want to mention, this was a game, I don't know if it ever got ported to console, but I played it on PC. It was a very short, pretty much only narrative game, called The Stanley Parable. It was pretty popular at the time of its release, but essentially you play as a character named Stanley in a fourth wall demolishing story where the narrator reads to you what Stanley is supposed to do in order to complete the story. As Stanley, you have the option to do or not do any of these things. Now, there's no dialogue, so there's no dialogue options. You're not choosing between things to say, but you can really speak with your actions and do anything else. And in fact, I think we've both got some pretty funny stories about defying the narrator in that game.
Yeah, that's sort of what the whole point of the game is. Like, the narrator is talking about like everything you're doing, and he's like, every time you don't go through the right doorway, he's like trying to push you to like go back and make the right decisions. But there's so many endings in that game. It's just really good.
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking for purely just like a ton of endings, this game has a ton. The game is mostly ending.
It's just going through different doorways and jumping off random stuff just to see what the narrator's going to say about it. But yeah, it's a kind of a short game with just a great comedic narrative to it.
Yeah, I think the official, story is that you play as Stanley, like I said before, and you work in an office building, and your job is to push this one button. You push the button that you're supposed to push, and then all of a sudden you feel a sense of agency. And so now you're in this office building, and the narrator is reading off of the script what it is that you're supposed to do, and it's your job as the player to not do those things most of the time.
It's a great game, especially it's probably like $5 on Steam right now. You get it on sale. So should we talk about bad stories or bad narratives, bad writing in video games?
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about. Well, I don't know. Let's get some more good ones in here. I want to feel good. Let's talk about more games.
We should make a podcast about that.
I know it's going to be a hard sell. Talk about more games, Andrew.
So Papers, Please is another game that I really enjoy. Pretty much you play as a checkpoint person who checks the paperwork of incoming people trying to get past the border. And it's sort of like, I guess it's like the Berlin Wall. I guess there was checkpoints there, and you kind of think of the cultural system going on during that time. And throughout the game, there's more rules that get passed by the government saying that certain people from certain nations can't pass. And as the game goes on, there's more and more things you have to look at, like people's date of birth, if there's the issuing cities rights, and people are trying to smuggle things into the country, such as drugs and other contraband. So you always have to make sure they don't have anything like that on them. But as the game progresses, you get in contact with the people that's part of the secret rebellion, and you have to decide if you're going to try to pass certain people that shouldn't pass regularly to just help out the resistance and try to end the tyranny of this communistic state. So, have you played all the way through Papers, Please?
I did not play all the way through, but I enjoyed a lot of what I did play. And this is a great example of one of those games that really does have a good narrative, but the gameplay is for a particular kind of person, because most of what you do is look through paperwork for very detailed things. So if you're attracted to, kind of the search and find kind of games, this is definitely a better version of that, I think. I really enjoyed the little bits of story, obviously there's the overarching narrative of the resistance trying to infiltrate the communist country that you work for, but there's also smaller things. There's one guy who's always coming to the border with something wrong with his paperwork, and he comes and you're supposed to deny him in order to keep making money. You get fined actually if you let people through that aren't supposed to, and then you have less money to feed your family and keep the lights on and stuff. So there's
right, because I was just gonna say at the end of each day, depending on how well you do at your job, you get a certain amount of money, and then say when your family member gets sick, then you actually got to pay money for that and decide if you can keep the lights on, keep the heat on throughout the winter. And unless you do really good at the game, you're going to sacrifice some stuff. So it gets really challenging really fast.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting is the narrative that it encourages you to live through with it, because you can make all of the perfect decisions, and the game will let you do that. You can, be the hard and ruthless person, not let people in with good excuses. Maybe their mother is sick and they've lost their paperwork or something like that, and it could be absolutely true. The game will encourage you to deny those people, and so you have this thing where, as gamers, a lot of us, at least, some of us, tend to be min-maxers. Play the game as well as you can play it, and this game really makes you feel like an awful person for trying to play the game as well as you can. So
Right,
that kind of
definitely.
narrative tension is already built in, and so you have this great resistance story. Are you going to help the resistance of a country that you serve that might be giving you the money to help your family, but you know is wrong? Are you going to continue to deny people that have a really good reason for having entry to the country? And that one funny guy that keeps coming back with the wrong paperwork, is he really that harmful?
Right. And there's even like sort of negative. There's like negative things too. Like people can try to bribe you if like you're in desperate need of money and someone offers you extra money that you know you can like get medicine for your sick child just to let him through, even though he's like smuggling in drugs or something into the country. You're more likely to do it because you don't want to see your family die.
Yeah, it raises a whole lot of really good moral questions.
It's even worse because like there's only a certain amount of time in each day, so like you got to make these decisions pretty quickly. So it's just a lot of stressful decision making, but it's fun because it's a game.
So I think that wraps up Papers, Please, yeah?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so I'm going to do a 2-for-1, and Portal and Portal 2.
I knew this was coming.
Portal and Portal 2 are my favorite 2 video games ever, and it has to do with this exact topic, narrative and story. If you've been living under a rock, the gist of Portal is that you are a test subject for a scientific equipment or technology company. You are performing a number of tests and puzzles to sort of test this portal device that opens up one portal, and you can travel through to the other side wherever you happen to shoot the other portal. It works like a gun. And so the gameplay, obviously really fun. They probably could have stopped there, but they didn't, because it's Valve, and they have this wonderful story of you being a trapped test subject while the overseeing computer mocks you and scorns you and tries to play tricks on you, and you attempt to escape. And that's sort of the overarching theme of both games, although I will say I think Portal 2 did it a little bit better. I mean, it's a few years newer, everything looks better, it sounds better, you get one or two more characters in the mix, and it's just, I mean, it's a pretty wild ride, and it's a game that you want to hear every word of.
Right, definitely. So yeah, I played through Portal 1 and 2 as well, and just the humor of the game's great. And when you're doing these difficult puzzles in the test chambers, like you're trying to get through it just to hear what the characters are going to say. Like once you begin the test and then end it, normally the characters have some type of funny dialogue, so it's really a motivating factor for you to finish up the puzzle just so you can continue the story.
All right. And now I'm willing to move into bad ones if you want.
Okay, so the thing about bad ones, I've been trying to think of some bad ones, and that's a lot harder. So I was probably going to talk about some Telltale games, even though they have good stories, just like how the choices almost never matter at all. And that just really breaks sort of the feeling of that your choices matter. There's a word for that. I don't know.
The illusion of choice.
Yeah, the illusion of choice. I mean, I would say some of the Telltale games, like some of them have really good stories, but they also tend to have some of the worst like flaws in storytelling, in my opinion. So if you've ever played a Telltale game before, at least modern ones, they tend to be very choice-based, where like your character will say certain dialogues, and then other characters will remember that. And then some of the bigger decisions is like who you're going to save when you got to make a split decision between person A or person B. But what always happens in those kind of choices is that even though you save person A, in the next episode they die anyway. So like none of your choices really matter, and then this railroad of a story just continues going despite what choices you make. And even though that's not a complete bad thing, like I know you can't just have all these choices and thousands of branching stories, like it just never seems to matter at all. So this illusion of choice just breaks down pretty quick.
You know, actually, as soon as you said Telltale Games, I was reminded of a game that you and I played together. Even though it was single player, we just kind of mostly talked and while one of us played it. It was by Square Enix.
Oh, Life is Strange.
Enix. Yeah, Life is Strange. Let's dive into a little bit of what Life is Strange was about.
Oh dear. So, do you want me to explain it, or do you want to try to?
Yeah, give a little bit of background.
Okay.
And
so, Life is Strange takes place in this small Oregon town, and this girl named Max, she discovers she has the power to control time, or at least rewind time in like short intervals of like 10 seconds. So anytime like she's talking to someone, she can like rewind time to like say something better, or if she gets better information later in the conversation, it can only like help her out later on. But where it really helps out her is like her best friend, like she saves using this power. Like she rewinds time and like saves her without getting much into the story. She does that several times because she always ends up trying to hurt herself, it seems. Like she always gets shot by someone, or a train runs her over. Like it's sort of Final Destination-ish, where like no matter what she does, she's going to die. And that's sort of, I don't know where I'm going with this. We'll just cut out
right.
part of that.
So no, but I don't think we need to cut that out. But so Max continues to rewind time in critical situations and try to make better choices than she did the first time, which everybody wishes they could do. And if you're just now hearing about Telltale Games from Andrew's discussion, this sounds like a great feature, because then you could just take all of those crappy choices, maybe they mattered, maybe they didn't, and you can make better ones. But the way Square Enix handled this was that the choices were even more vague and mattered less, because since you could rewind time and just make the better choice, they make all of the dialogue options like so vague, and the characters that you're speaking with, their reactions are so unpredictable that it really doesn't benefit you at all. And you kind of just have to go with the least of the worst options.
Right. It's sort of where these choices come into play, is like, they always say, like, before you leave an area, whatever choices you made, they're going to be locked in. Like, you can't rewind back to that point. And it's like, the choices, like you said, were so vague, you would never know, like, if it would even matter, and a lot of the time it didn't. But the ones you did just choose, like, it was a complete wrong decision, even though it's obviously the better one. It's like when you tell the principal about, like, the gun you saw in the bathroom, like, that comes back to bite you. And I don't understand it.
Yeah, from the principal.
Right.
You tell the principal that someone had a gun in the school, and that later ends up directly impacting your relationship with the principal in a way that is not positive.
Right. And I think that's sort of the point of the game, is like, you make the right decision and it ends up bad. I don't know if that was the message they were trying to convey, but that's how I took it.
Also, they one minor qualm that I want to get out about Life is Strange, which isn't, I guess it's sort of related to the narrative. The title is Life is Strange. Most games don't find it necessary to, it's like indie band songs. You don't have to say the title of the song in the song. But Life is Strange had this great moment where they could have said that, and instead your lead heroine Max Caulfield says, "Life is weird."
That was the best part of the whole game for me, or possibly the worst, I don't know. But I will say that, like, I did enjoy the story. Like, it was a pretty fun game to play through, but it was so different just seeing your choices, like, matter in a way, but like Telltale, it didn't really matter. Because like every time a major decision happens, like time freezes and Max looks really dramatic. She's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then it just somehow always fails. Good game, though. I would play it again, but just don't expect much getting into it.
Oh, what a game.
That's weird. I used to defend that game, but now the more I think about it, I'm like, that was so bad. Yeah.
It was bad, but I enjoyed it. It's like The Room.
All right, other bad games.
I don't know. I think we've probably got a show's worth of content there.